I'm Duncan McLeod, and this is the TechCentral Show. TCS is brought to you by MTN Business. Visit mtnbusiness.co.za to learn more. It was a big news day on Monday. After an exhaustive investigation, South Africa's Competition Commission has made a number of sweeping recommendations in its provisional report flowing from its media and digital platforms market inquiry. The Commission found that the behavior of various big tech platforms, including Google and Meta platforms, has damaged the South African news media industry, and it has now made a range of provisional recommendations to remedy this situation. This includes a proposal that Google pays the South African media between 300 million and 500 million rand in compensation, the Commission's word, over a 3 to 5 year period. Now, to unpack all of this, I'm joined in the studio now by Competition Commission Technical Lead Donnavan-John Linley. Donovan, thank you for making the time, and you must have been a busy man over the last little while.
It has been a very busy time, yes. We've had over 2,000 submissions.
2,000?
Over 40 participants in public hearings. So it's been a very busy time. We've had 4 requests for information, and we've got lots of information we had to go through, analyze, and prepare this report. So it has been a long, rigorous process.
Tell me about this inquiry. What was its genesis, and what did the Commission hope to achieve through it?
Sure. There's been other inquiries like this in other jurisdictions. The original one was done in Australia, the Australian Consumer and Competition Commission, and they came to outcomes that were bargaining outcomes. But ultimately, there were some unintended consequences where Meta decided to stop the news on Meta, and the beneficiaries of this bargaining council was a winner-takes-all kind of situation. South Africa, like the rest of the world, we are having a decline in media revenues being earned. This has had an impact on journalism, cut journalism in half, and this really impacts democracy and good quality investigative journalism. And so what we want to do is sort of bring some balance to the value that news media brings to these digital platforms that surface on these digital platforms. And this was largely also initiated by a lot of media houses saying, listen, we have a problem here and we need to resolve it. And so that's where the genesis of this inquiry came about.
We've seen considerable pushback from big tech. You mentioned the Australian example. Both Google and Meta pushed back hard, and I think Facebook said we're no longer going to serve news in our feeds in Australia. Tough luck, guys. We're leaving this market. Do you expect a similar aggressive reaction from big tech to these rules that you're proposing here?
Well, yeah. We're in the preliminary stages, so it's really too hard. It's too hard to say right now.
You're right.
With Google, I think there is a notion of compensation, and I think we've been in engagements with them. So it's just really a question of how much, and we will continue with engagements with Google. Meta, they have threatened in other jurisdictions to remove the news. So what we've really focused on is that they restore. They've deprecated news media on their platforms, and we're arguing that they will putting the provisional remedy that they restore referral traffic on the platform itself to what it was before, which in South African context would be 100%.
Yes.
Or a doubling of referral traffic.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, take me, Donovan, then, if you don't mind, through the key findings of the provisional report. What have you determined?
So the big area or the issue was the Google referral traffic aspect. So for a lot of news media, about 40% of their traffic comes from the Google platform, and it's almost on par with direct traffic to their own websites. So that's a big proportion of the traffic that they get. So Google was a very big focal point. What we try to do is get a short-term and a long-term perspective. In the short term, the compensation of 300 to 500 million was calculated using the value that news media brings to the platform. It also incorporates the value that Google brings to news media in terms of referral traffic. So we had this balancing of collective value. And that's how we got to the 3 to 500 million value transfer.
And that's where the sticking point, I presume, is going to be post this report.
Yeah, I mean, that's probably, I would argue, one of the bigger findings, but there's a whole lot of other findings as well. What we do find is, I mean, we also looked at personalized feeds like Google Discover, which is one of their products as well. And what we do find is, especially in particular on Google search and where the top stories, carousels are triggered by a news query, we find that there's and it might be an algorithm, we think it might just be an algorithm design, but there's an overrepresentation of foreign news in South Africa. So something for Google to consider, to bring more local news media prominence on the search engine results page and in the top stories carousel. I mean, this also further extends to YouTube. I mean, we find that when you do a Google search in the top stories carousels triggered, there's a lot of YouTube video clips, but it eclipses our local publications like SABC, Eyewitness News, etc., by a factor of 300 to 400 times. So, I mean, there's a self-preferencing argument there as well. A lot of the aim is also to bring about media plurality and diversity as well. So we a lot of the remedies is focused on elevating the vernacular and community news. And we find that vernacular news, for example, have higher click-through rates. So there is real demand in South Africa for news in local languages. So then also just there's the YouTube, with YouTube.
Let's explore YouTube in a little bit of detail, because you specifically stated that YouTube should improve the ability, I'm quoting here, of the media and broadcasters, including the SABC, to monetize their content on its platform through increases in the revenue share to 70%.
Yes.
I presume that's 70% in favor of the publisher.
Yes.
Right. This is a global number that Google, YouTube uses to pay publishing partners. Why would they deviate in a small market like South Africa? Wouldn't the easier solution for Google just simply say, well, okay, we're not going to participate in this market anymore then? Like they've done in Australia with news.
Yeah, like I say, it's an ongoing thing. It's an ongoing investigation. I think Google has a strong interest. For South Africa might be small, but it's also an important market. I mean, we're kind of a doorway to the rest of Africa as well.
Right.
So I think Google, by just setting up headquarters here and just there's a sense that they really are interested in the African market. And besides that, I mean, in terms of future growth, I mean, Africa is going to be one of the biggest continents in terms of population going forward. So there's a very strong forward-looking.
I'm just wondering how much pushback there's going to be, especially given, and we can't ignore the geopolitical context of the world at the moment. We've got Donald Trump in the White House. He has been making very belligerent sounds towards the EU, saber rattling, I think I can call it, around tariffs, and saying that the Digital Markets Act and the work that competition regulators in Europe are doing effectively amounts to a tax on American companies, and that if this doesn't stop, he's going to impose tariffs on Europe. Are we not poking the bear with this investigation?
Well, I mean, that's not the intention. I mean, this inquiry was started in October 2023, so that was way before anyone could have predicted that Trump got elected. I mean, similar sort of compensation models have also occurred in California, which is also within the United States. So it's not a unique thing that South Africa is doing. We might have a unique approach, and the unique approach really aims for a win-win situation. So the tariff aspect is actually more like a fallback scenario, but the main objective really is just to get some kind of compensation now, and then in the longer term get sustainable traffic to news media, because I mean Google can't forever be compensating news media either. There has to be sustainable solutions, and that's what we really are focused on going.
Okay. But James Hodge, who I think is your chief economist at the Competition Commission, said in the press event on Monday that he made it very clear that the Competition Commission is also prepared to wield a big stick if these companies are not willing to come to the party and talk to the Commission about remedies. I think he specifically said we have the power to impose a 5 to 10%. I don't know if it was a fine or a levy on the revenue that these companies make in the South African market. Is the Competition Commission really prepared to go that far?
Well, I mean, this is still preliminary stages. So, I mean, it will also involve some kind of engagements with other South African government agencies as well to make that a reality. But again, like I say, this is not our direction. This is a fallback.
Yes.
I mean, there is a lot of, in some investigations we've done, I mean, I've worked previously on the online intermediation platform market inquiry with involved Google search, booking.com, for example. And you do see a lot of value being taken out of South Africa with not necessarily that much being invested in the country. So this is, I mean, this is something that, I mean, government needs to also consider.
Are you proposing compensation be paid by any other big tech companies, or are you limiting that to Google?
At this point in time, it's Google. It's just we also want to be practical about this and realistic about what we can get out of this inquiry.
Okay.
Yeah.
So let's assume that that you reach an agreement with Google on a remedy and that there is some compensation that's going to be paid to the local media industry. How would the Competition Commission like to see that work? And how do you divide up that money to media houses?
Yeah, this is also, again, something that's going to be, this preliminary stage is just really to calculate the value of news media. We did put out that, I mean, the consideration of distribution is an important factor going forward, and we'd like engagements going forward. I think what's important tenets to that is a needs basis and to bring about plurality and diversity in news. So that's going to be factored into how the money is also going to be distributed amongst news media.
Okay. Yeah. So what are the next steps here? You've published this provisional report, I think you're calling it. I presume there are further deadlines in this process. You're going to ask for written feedback. What are the next steps, and when do Google and the other companies need to come back to you by?
Sure. I mean, we've given them 6 weeks to get back to us.
6 weeks, is that enough time?
Look, we set the target for 6 weeks. We would hope that they can get back to us in 6 weeks. But obviously adaptable. It's as an organization. But we do. We just we want the big tech guys and news media to digest the report. It is a big report. It is a complicated report. So, I mean, I empathize in that sense. And then we'll have further engagement. So we'll have further requests for information, which is going to be further investigation. And we're going to have further submissions and engagements with stakeholders. And then hopefully we'll resolve a final outcome. We expect that to be about 4 to 5 months from now. And we'll publish the final report where the remedial actions will be legally binding. So we could have recommendations, which is optional, and then legally binding remedial actions.
Do you have further public hearings, or is that now in the past?
The public hearings are in the past, but we will be engaging stakeholders directly. We can have in-camera sessions as well. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. So
All right. Now, the Commissioner said, and I want to quote this, it said, to address misinformation, the Electronic Communications and Transactions Act should be amended to introduce platform liability for harmful content and the amplification of misinformation. The Commission has proposed that the social media platforms partner with and compensate the media on fact-checking. This one's particularly interesting because we've seen what's happened with Facebook/Meta in the US and the advisory board around that, and we've seen how Mark Zuckerberg has cozied up to Donald Trump, and the fact-checking thing has definitely been demoted at Meta. What you're proposing here kind of goes against what the Trump administration is proposing in the US, that there be absolute free speech on these online platforms. You're clearly taking a different view to the US administration. Given the pressures on Meta from in the US. Do you think they'll really comply with this? Here's a small market at the tip of Africa saying we need more fact checking, we need more of the things that they are actually moving against in the US at the moment. It seems like a bit of a dichotomy to me. How do you resolve this, and can you resolve it?
Yeah, I mean, we're different countries with different values. And I'm sure that the big tech platforms can appreciate that. I mean, ultimately what we want is good, credible news stories to go out, and the public to be informed and have a balance in what they're being informed in. Mm-hmm. I mean, a lot of these things are also subject to debate. We'll be engaging with the tech platforms going forward, as we've just finished a preliminary process, but we also have to engage other government agencies like the Department of Communications and Digital Technologies on addressing the ECTA Act. In terms of, providing sort of liability on the expanding of disinformation. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Allow me to play devil's advocate for a moment. What we're seeing in the media space is probably played out many, many times before in other industries. It almost feels again like the creative destruction that capitalism is famous for, a creative destruction that ultimately drives innovation and new business models and all of that sort of thing. Is the interference in the sector that the Competition Commission is proposing here really warranted, and can the market not be trusted to ultimately sort itself out?
Yeah, I mean, there is definitely an aspect of creative destruction. And I actually, in the report, I mentioned Joseph Schumpeter, which is the guy who coined the term creative destruction. There's been a fundamental change, and news media has to adapt to the change. I mean, people are consuming the news on their phones, and that's just a reality. And so there's...
And through social media, we know this. People are getting their news on TikTok.
No, exactly.
They're getting their news on Facebook. So, I mean, what is the solution here? I mean, it's clearly... The social media has clearly damaged what Elon Musk and his ilk call the legacy media, the traditional media, is the term I prefer. But where is all this leading? I mean, is regulatory intervention really required, or do new business models for journalism emerge out of this destruction that we're seeing at the moment?
I think it's both. It's both. I think the idea of compensation just gives the media some scope, some breathing space to adapt their models and develop a healthy, more sustainable
Does that happen though, or do they take the money and continue as it was, and then 5 years from now, oops, we're out of money again?
Well, that's up to them. That's really up to them, what they decide to do with it.
Yeah.
But we really want to create an environment that's long. The model's changed. I mean, that's just the reality, and we really want media to adopt a healthy approach and just adapt with the change. Mm-hmm. And we find that some of the news medias have done quite a good job at, getting multiple sources of income and creating a stronger, more robust media through adapting to the changes that we're experiencing at the moment. So yeah, I mean, if the legacy media want to stick to the old model and just want more money, then in the long term, it's really their responsibility to change if they want to survive.
Okay. So what the Commission is proposing here is building a bridge to get to the other side, and then the media figures out what it's going to do.
I love that analogy, yes. Yeah.
There's another, I don't want to call it a problem, but there's another big issue, let's call it that, on the horizon, and that's artificial intelligence, generative artificial intelligence. We know that AI companies have an insatiable appetite for content to train their AI models, and there have been allegations that some of these companies, I've got no doubt it's true, have simply stolen publishers' content even before those publishers had a chance to say no or even know what these AI companies are doing. I know the Commission has dealt with AI in its provisional report. What did it find, and what has it proposed?
Yeah, so what we do find is there's a sort of bifurcation of news media where the big media houses, and I'm talking about global, are the ones who threaten the litigation against the OpenAIs and the big AI companies. So to avert that litigation, they strike deals. But then their content's being used to train the AI model. So you've got a very sort of AI trained on a very limited set of information with certain ideologies, etc., which comes through in the AI generated results. And so what want is to give the opportunity for South African news publishers to also monetize. Some have archives of information that they could use. And we've pretty much given an exemption. Well, we're arguing for an exemption for collective bargaining as a whole with the big AI companies to get some monetary value for their content for training. There's also value to bringing South African content to the training, because if it's only trained on one set of information, you kind of got your AI results in that sort of ideology, if you want to call it that way, or that way of thinking, or the way of...
In those 2,000 submissions you received, did you receive submissions from big AI companies like OpenAI and others?
Yeah. OpenAI was part of the public hearings.
Are they open?
Engaged with them.
Are they open to this idea?
Look, we just published our report, so they'll get back to us on that.
But I mean, in the hearings and stuff, did they were they open to the idea of paying for content to train their models?
It was a bit of a wishy-washy thing.
Okay.
But, yeah.
Okay. I suppose there would be. Yeah. Okay. So it sounds to me then, just lastly, Donnavan, that you've effectively drawn a line in the sand here, but you've said, guys, come and talk to us. We are open to negotiation, and the proposals we put on the table are not necessarily final. How prepared are you to negotiate? I mean, how much ground are you willing to give? Is what's contained in this report pretty much what you expect the final outcomes to be?
Yeah, I mean, we've already done a previous inquiry. We have engaged in the online intermediation, and we have got commitments and remedial actions that were adhered to. And we have engaged Google not only in this inquiry but the previous one as well. So there is open doors of communication, and I mean, we do foresee further engagement. I mean, some platforms are more hostile than others. I can say Google has been quite open with us and engaging with us.
How's X been?
Distant.
Yes.
Yes.
Did they participate?
No, they refused to participate. X and TikTok did not participate in the public hearings, but we had Meta.
Interesting.
Yeah, but we did have Meta participating in the public hearings. Google did a lot of participation. We had OpenAI also participating in the public hearings as well.
You know how vociferous Musk is on these topics. Have you made any specific findings against X in your provisional report?
So it's about restoring traffic to news media as it was before. And then so
that would require a change to the algorithm, as it would with Facebook.
I guess, yes. I mean, Facebook did signal that they had more interest in surfacing community news. So that's something that we don't have a problem with. We want to elevate community, because, I mean, also a cornerstone of communities is community news. Yes. So we want to elevate the community news as well. And then also depending on further engagements, the proposal of changing legislation on the ECTA Act would probably apply to X as well.
Okay.
Yeah.
So lots of interesting developments ahead, I think. I think lots of us are going to be grabbing popcorn and watching this with a great deal of interest, especially as that deadline looms for the feedback, which is when again? It's in April, you said?
Yeah, April, yeah.
April. Yeah. So I guess we'll have some insight into exactly how big tech is going to respond to these draft proposals that you've put on the table. But Donnavan Linley, you are the technical lead at the Competition Commission and have been intimately involved in preparing this provisional report. Thank you so much for sharing your insights with TechCentral today. Much appreciated.
Pleasure. Thank you, Duncan.
Thank you.